She was just another passenger on a long flight crossing the ocean. Sitting quietly in seat 22C, she looked like a normal tourist, simple clothes, a small travel bag under the seat, and a guidebook folded in her hand. Anyone watching her would have thought she was just excited to visit a new country. Nothing about her gave the slightest hint that she carried a past the world had no idea about. No one knew her story, and she never talked about it either. The cabin was calm, lights dimmed. Just enough for comfort. People were either sleeping, watching movies, or talking softly with seatmates. She sat quietly, keeping her window shade halfway open so she could see the clouds. She always liked watching the sky. It made her feel peaceful, even when she tried to forget the life she once had. She had spent years avoiding attention, avoiding questions, avoiding anything that could reveal who she really was. The flight crew moved through the aisle with relaxed smiles. Nothing felt unusual. It was just a regular flight until at VOUSN T. About 4 hours after takeoff, the calm rhythm of the plane changed. A sudden announcement came from the cockpit, but the captain's voice sounded different, polite, but tense, controlled, yet strange. He simply said, "Ladies and gentlemen, everything is normal, but we may experience a slight change in our route. Kindly remain seated." Most passengers didn't think much of it, but she lifted her head slowly, sensing something. Her instincts built from a past she had tried to bury immediately felt the shift in tone. She looked out the window again, this time with purpose. The clouds outside moved gently, nothing unusual. But when she leaned a little closer, she saw something that made her breath pause for a moment. Far below, in the distance, two small shapes glided upward, fast, smooth. She blinked, making sure she wasn't imagining it. It was not imagination. 2 fighter jets, but they weren't just any jets. Their shape, their wings, their speed, she recognized them instantly. She had seen them before, many years back, during a time she didn't talk about. They were American. They were climbing fast, heading toward the commercial airliner. She sat back slowly, trying to stay calm. The passengers around her didn't seem to notice anything. People kept eating, reading, laughing softly. Even the man in 22B was busy scrolling through movies without looking outside. She swallowed as her heartbeat grew heavier. Why were those jets here? Why this flight? Why now? A flight attendant walked down the aisle suddenly, speaking softly with another crew member. Their faces looked calm, but their eyes didn't. She noticed the way they avoided eye contact with passengers. They were hiding concern. Something was happening. And then, it happened, the moment that changed everything. A soft ding echoed overhead. A crew member approached her row, not the whole row, just her. He leaned slightly, his voice low enough so only she could hear. "Ma'am, the cockpit is requesting to speak with you." She stared at him, confused. "Me? Why?" He hesitated. They received a message about you." Her chest tightened. A message about her? That didn't make any sense. She had booked this flight under her civilian passport. She lived quietly. She avoided attention. No one, absolutely no one, should have been able to connect her to anything. "Is there a problem?" she asked gently. The attendant leaned closer. "They said your call sign came through." Her heartbeat stopped for a second. Call sign, a word she had not heard directed at her in years. A word she thought was buried forever. She kept her voice steady. "What call sign?" He whispered it carefully, as if saying something sacred. "Falcon 7. Her hands froze. She had not heard that name since the day she walked away from the life she once lived. A life that was supposed to remain hidden. A life she believed she had erased. Her call sign was never meant to be spoken again, but someone had spoken it. Someone powerful enough to reach the cockpit. Someone powerful enough to send fighter jets. She glanced out the window once more. The Jets were closer, now much closer. Smooth, steady, silent guardians flying alongside Dot, and then she understood. Those jets weren't here to threaten the plane. They were here because of her. Because somewhere ahead on the same route, another aircraft was flying, a very special aircraft, a famous one, a protected one. Air Force One. And if her call sign had reached them, it meant only one thing. They knew who she truly was. They remembered her. And with that single call sign, her quiet life as a tourist in Seat 22C was over. Her past had returned at 35,000 feet, and the whole world was about to find out. Why Air Force One wanted her in the sky. The moment she stood up from Seat 22C, the entire atmosphere around her shifted, but not in a loud or visible way. It was something quiet, something subtle, something only a person with her past could feel. Passengers around her hardly noticed her rise. Some moved their legs to let her pass. One woman smiled politely. A child in the next row waved a small toy airplane. Everything looked normal, but nothing was normal anymore. The fighter jets outside had taken position on both wings now, flying close enough that she could see the shine of their metal in the sunlight. Their presence alone meant something. Serious was unfolding, but the strange thing was, the plane wasn't in danger. It wasn't losing control. No alarms were ringing. No warnings flashed. This wasn't an emergency. This was a summons. A call meant only for her, and she knew who had the authority to send it. As she walked toward the front of the aircraft, the flight attendant followed her closely, not touching her, but clearly instructed not to lose sight of her. He was nervous. She could feel it in his steps. Every few seconds, he glanced at her as if trying to understand who she truly was. Passengers whispered as she passed. They had no idea what was happening, but they sensed something unusual. They noticed the escort jets. They noticed the tension in the crew. And they noticed the quiet woman from Seat 22C being called forward. She kept walking, keeping her face calm. Inside her chest, her heart beat with the steady rhythm of someone who had faced storms before. When she reached the galley near the cockpit door, the senior flight attendant was waiting for her. He looked serious but respectful. "They're waiting for you," he said quietly. She nodded once. He stepped aside and opened the small door into the cockpit. The air inside was different. Heavy, serious, focused. Both pilots turned to look at her. Their faces showed confusion mixed with respect, like they were meeting someone important, but didn't know why. The captain cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we received a transmission for you. A direct coded signal." She frowned slightly. "A signal? Through civilian frequencies?" He shook his head. "No, it came through a protected military channel. Something we aren't normally authorized to receive. But the system unlocked itself the moment the message arrived." She stayed silent. The captain reached into a small compartment and pulled out a printed slip of paper, the kind used for short emergency messages. He handed it to her carefully, as if passing something fragile. She unfolded it slowly. It was only one line, one short, powerful line that froze the air around her. "Falcon 7, confirm presence. Priority 1 clearance. Air Force One requests direct communication." Her fingers tightened around the paper. She thought she had left that world forever. No alliances, no missions, no government ties, no call sign. She had walked away quietly, choosing a life without uniforms or responsibilities. A hidden life. A normal life. But someone, somewhere had pulled her back into the sky. The captain kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, are you able to explain what this means?" She didn't answer immediately. She kept staring at the message, hearing old memories echo in her mind, voices calling her through headsets. Coded instructions, high-risk missions, the quiet pride of serving in a role only a few knew existed. She lifted her eyes slowly. There must be a mistake. But the first officer shook his head. With respect, this message came through a channel only known to, well, people who don't make mistakes. Then he added carefully, and the jets outside. They responded the moment your call sign appeared on the system. She looked out the cockpit window now that the fighters were flying closer than she expected. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Protecting. Not the plane. Her. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she opened them, she spoke softly, but firmly. What altitude are we maintaining? 35,000 feet, the captain replied. And Air Force One? What's its approximate location? He swallowed. Our systems picked up its transponder. It's approaching from the east. Same corridor, same flight level, only a few minutes out. A few minutes. Her past was minutes away from finding her. Captain leaned forward slightly. Ma'am, whoever you are, they want you. She gave a small breath and finally said something she never thought she'd say again. I need to speak to them. Both pilots glanced at each other, half surprised, half relieved. The first officer handed her the headset. It wasn't built for long conversations, just basic communication, but she didn't need long. She placed the headset on gently. The captain pressed a switch. The line clicked open. A voice came through, calm, deep, commanding. Falcon 7. This is Eagle Command. Air Force One is eager to confirm your identity. Please respond. Her breath stilled for half a second. They weren't waiting. They already knew. She straightened. Her voice steady but carrying weight she had avoided for years. This is Falcon 7. Identity confirmed. The cockpit went silent. The captain's eyes widened. The first officer froze mid-breath. And the voice on the other end replied with words that shook the entire moment. Falcon 7. Stand by. The Commander-in-Chief requests your presence. Asterisk, the line went silent after the last message, so silent that it felt louder than any sound inside the cockpit. She removed the headset slowly, but her hands were steady, almost too steady for someone who had just been asked to speak to the most powerful office on Earth. The pilots watched her without blinking, waiting for some sign of what they should do next, but she didn't speak. She didn't explain. She simply turned toward the cockpit window. And then something happened. None of the passengers would ever forget. Shadow passed over their plane, smooth, massive, and unmistakable. The sky above them changed color for a moment as a second aircraft crossed their path. Not close enough to be dangerous, but close enough to be seen clearly. It wasn't just any aircraft. It wasn't just a government plane. It was the one aircraft every pilot, every crew member, every aviation enthusiast in the world recognized. Instantly, the blue and white livery, the sweeping stripe, the unmistakable presidential seal near the nose. Air Force One. It flew above them with a slow, deliberate confidence, as if making an introduction. The passengers gasped. Some shouted. Some took out their phones. Others pressed their faces to the windows in disbelief. Air Force One never flew near commercial planes, never entered shared air corridors, never revealed its position unless absolutely required. But today, it had passed directly over them, because of her, because of Falcon 7. The pilots stared out the windshield, with their mouths slightly open. I've flown for 27 years, the captain whispered, and I have never, ever seen Air Force One take a position like that. The first officer nodded shakily. This isn't an escort. This is invitation. The word hung in the air. Invitation. She didn't react outwardly, but inside her chest something tightened. Not fear, not panic. Recognition. She had flown near that aircraft once, only once in her past life, during a training exercise she wasn't allowed to discuss. She never thought she would see it again. She never thought anyone from that world would remember her. She thought she had left without a trace. But someone, somewhere at the highest level, Hadn't forgotten. The radio crackled again. Falcon 7, maintain current altitude. Air Force 1 will establish formation. Stand by for instructions. The captain looked at her for guidance. For the first time, the authority in the cockpit didn't belong entirely to him. Should we comply? She nodded. Yes, follow their lead. He didn't question her. Not after what he'd just seen. Outside, the two fighter jets shifted, slightly realigning themselves with Air Force 1. The entire formation moved like a choreographed dance, calm, controlled, and purposeful. Passengers noticed everything now. Some were frightened. Some were amazed. Many whispered that something historic was happening. None of them knew the quiet tourist from 22C was the center of it all. The plane leveled perfectly as instructed. She kept her eyes fixed on Air Force 1. It wasn't slowing down. It wasn't speeding away. It was holding a precise alignment, almost like it was waiting for her next move. Then the voice returned. Falcon 7, please confirm readiness. Transfer protocol is in effect. The captain blinked. Transfer? What transfer? She understood immediately. This isn't a simple communication, she said softly. They want to move me. The first officer's jaw dropped. Move you? To Air Force 1? She gave a small breath. Yes. They didn't say the next part, but they all felt it. People didn't get invited aboard Air Force 1 mid-flight unless something extraordinary was happening. The voice came again, calm and precise. Falcon 7, Air Force 1 is opening corridor. Access. Prepare for airborne retrieval. The captain whispered, this is impossible. They've never done that with a civilian plane, not once. She closed her eyes briefly, but then another voice came, different, softer, and carrying a tone that felt strangely familiar. Falcon 7. This is Eagle 1. I was told you might be here. It has been a long time. Her breath caught for the first time since leaving her seat. Only one person used the call sign, Eagle 1, in that tone. Only one person she had ever addressed with the same quiet respect, the President of the United States. But not just any president, someone who, years ago, before entering politics, had been part of the same world she belonged to. Someone who had once flown missions where call signs mattered more than names. Someone who had once stood beside her on a tarmac at sunrise and said, if the world ever forgets you, I won't. She never imagined he meant it, yet here he was, calling her personally. Her throat felt tight, but her voice stayed steady as she responded, Eagle 1. This is Falcon 7, standing by. A pause. A warm, steady reply came through. We need you, Falcon 7. And I think you already know why. The cockpit went still. The entire plane seemed to pause in midair. She looked again at Air Force 1 flying. Above them like a guardian, whatever was happening, whatever had brought her call sign back to life, whatever danger or mission awaited. It was bigger than anything she had ever faced, and she was the only one they trusted. Asterisk. The cabin lights flickered, not because of a malfunction, but because the plane was entering the controlled air corridor now shaped around them. It felt as if the sky itself was rearranging to make space for one person. The passengers felt a strange stillness, something they couldn't explain. Some said it felt like flying through a story they would someday tell their grandchildren. Others said it felt like history brushing past their windows. She didn't know what they felt. Her mind was somewhere else, somewhere older, deeper. Somewhere she had locked away for years. As she stepped out of the cockpit and into the front galley, she paused. The quiet hum of the engines seemed to fade behind her. She wasn't the tourist from seat 22C anymore. She wasn't the woman trying to hide from her past. She felt like Falcon 7 again, not by choice, but by the weight of the sky calling her back. A member of the cabin crew, a man who had been confident earlier, now stood stiff, unsure how to address her. Ma'am, is everything all right? She looked at him gently. Everything will be fine. Her calmness didn't come from confidence. It came from experience the crew didn't understand but could sense in her voice. The man stepped aside respectfully, almost like he had been trained to greet people with authority. As she moved down the aisle, passengers stared. Some quietly asked each other who she was. Some tried to record her, but the flight attendants politely asked them to stop. Even in a moment filled with uncertainty, the cabin felt strangely united, everyone sensing that the woman from 22C was suddenly more than what she seemed. A little girl near row 18 whispered to her mother, "Is she a hero?" The mother didn't answer. She didn't know the truth. But she smiled nervously and said, "Maybe she is." When she reached her seat at 22C, she paused not to gather her things, but because she felt the weight of her old life and her new life meeting in that one narrow space. The spot where she had been invisible only an hour ago was now the center of the sky's attention. She reached under the seat and took out her small travel bag. It was ordinary on the outside, worn fabric, loose zipper, nothing special. But inside it she kept one item she hadn't touched in years. She unzipped the bag and reached for it. A small metal badge. Light, simple, and almost forgotten. Her old insignia. It was the only proof that Falcon 7 had ever existed. She stared at it for a moment as memories flooded her late-night missions. Briefings under dim lights, cold winds across dark runways, the feeling of responsibility heavier than the sky. She remembered walking away from all of it, promising herself she would never return. But the badge still fit perfectly in her hand. She closed her fingers around it. Falcon 7. She whispered, as if reminding herself who she used to be. A soft vibration ran through the cabin as the plane adjusted course again. The engines hummed deeper. The air pressure shifted slightly. The lights dimmed one level, almost as if preparing for a moment no civilian aircraft had prepared for before. The announcement from the captain came over the speakers, but his voice was quieter this time, not because he lacked authority, but because even he didn't fully understand the event happening under his command. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be entering a special formation. Please remain seated. Everything is under control." Passengers looked around nervously. Outside the windows, a breathtaking sight unfolded. 2 fighter jets slipped into a tighter escort, wings angled with precision. And above them, steady, majestic Air Force One held perfect alignment. For a moment, the sunlight hit its fuselage just right, making its iconic blue stripe shine like a beacon. People gasped. Some cried softly without knowing why. Others whispered prayers. Then something happened that no one expected. Air Force One lowered its altitude slowly, just enough to make the gesture unmistakable. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a command. It was a salute. Not to the aircraft, not to the pilots, but to Falcon 7, inside 22C. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, a mix of pride and fear, woven together so tightly that neither could be separated. The radio in the captain's cockpit clicked again, and the captain called her through the intercom. "Ma'am, they're requesting you at the forward cabin. They say it's time." She nodded once, even though he couldn't see her. She placed the insignia back in her pocket, gathered her travel bag on her shoulder, and stood up straight. The passengers watched her like they were witnessing the beginning of something historic. As she walked toward the front again, a man in row 21 whispered, "Who is she?" Someone answered softly, "Whoever she is, the sky knows her name." When she reached the front galley, the senior flight attendant stepped aside with the respect of someone opening a door for a head of state. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She took a slow breath. "I don't think anyone is ever ready for this," she said softly. "But I'm here." He nodded, then opened a small panel in the wall. Behind it was something the passengers didn't even know existed. Hidden access port, a link to the outside, a way for Air Force One to reach her. The sky had opened its door, and she was about to walk through it. Asterisk. The hidden access panel slid open with a quiet mechanical hiss, too soft for the passengers to hear, but loud enough to change the air around her. The senior flight attendant stepped back, his hands clasped as if he understood he was standing at the doorway between two different worlds. Behind the panel was not a door, not a hatch, but a compartment used only in rare aviation protocols. So old that even experienced crew had only read about them in training manuals they thought would never matter. Inside that compartment was a sealed communication module. No screens, no labels. Just a single device glowing with a soft blue light dot. It activated the moment she stepped closer. The entire aircraft felt as if it took a breath. Voice came through the small speaker embedded in the module, calm, deep, and unmistakable. Falcon 7. Approach point confirmed. Air Force One is ready for synchronized transfer. She froze, not because she was afraid, but because she knew what this meant. Synchronized transfer was a maneuver so rare it was nearly legendary, used only in situations where secrecy, urgency, and trust were all at their highest. It was a maneuver she had trained for once, but never experienced in real life. The senior attendant tried to speak, but his voice shook slightly. "Ma'am, what does synchronized transfer mean?" She didn't answer immediately. She kept her eyes on the blue glow. "It means," she said softly, "they're coming closer." Right on cue, the plane trembled, not from turbulence, but from the presence of something massive shifting near them. Passengers gasped. Some stood despite the seatbelt signs. A few shouted for answers. Through the windows, Air Force One moved. With impossible precision, lowering itself until it flew almost level with the commercial aircraft. Like two giants of the sky holding hands, people screamed, people cheered, people cried, but no one looked away, because who sees Air Force One at eye level? The captain made another announcement, his voice calm but carrying awe that couldn't be hidden. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated. We are in coordinated formation with a U.S. government aircraft. Everything is stable. Please do not stand." In the galley, the air pressure shifted once more. A new signal pulsed through the module, and the voice returned. "Falcon 7, your clearance to transfer is confirmed. A channel will open in 60 seconds. Prepare for airborne boarding." The senior attendant whispered, "Boarding? At 35,000 feet? That's impossible." She looked at him with a quiet certainty. Nothing is impossible for them. He believed her. Now everyone would. She adjusted the strap of her travel bag, the metallic insignia inside shifting slightly. She felt its weight against her palm and closed her fingers around it through the fabric. It grounded her, brought back the person she had once been, reminded her why her call sign mattered. The aircraft around her hummed with new energy as systems quietly shifted. Even though the passengers could not see what was happening inside the walls, they felt something extraordinary taking place. And then, the moment came. A soft metallic click echoed through the hidden panel. The compartment opened wider, revealing a slim pressurized tunnel emerging like a bridge being built in the air. Connection between two aircraft, a link between the present and her past, a pathway only meant for one person. But before she stepped forward, something unexpected happened. A flight attendant, a young one, approached her slowly. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Ma'am, if you don't mind, can I ask something?" She turned toward him gently. "Yes?" He hesitated. "Are you doing this willingly?" Her heart softened. He didn't care about protocol, about call signs, about world leaders. He cared if she was safe. That alone reminded her of the humanity she had been trying to protect her whole life. "Yes," she answered quietly. "I am." He nodded, relieved, but then another voice rose from the nearby rows, a woman in seat 1A who had been watching everything with fear in her eyes. "Will we be safe without you on the plane?" She asked. She paused. This question mattered more than any military protocol. "Yes," she said with certainty. Your pilots are strong. The jets outside will protect you, and I won't be far. That reassurance moved through the cabin like a warm wave. People relaxed. Some even smiled. Then the voice from the module came again, more urgent now. Falcon 7, corridor alignment complete. Proceed. She stepped closer to the pressurized tunnel. The walls inside glowed faintly, guiding her like a path carved out of the sky. The air was warmer, calmer, almost welcoming. But before she entered, she turned back one last time. Passengers stared at her with wide eyes, some filled with courage, some with confusion, some with gratitude they didn't fully understand. And she felt something heavy yet precious, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Responsibility, not the duty she once held, but a responsibility to the people in that cabin who had unknowingly trusted her with their fears. She nodded softly toward them. Then she stepped into the tunnel. As the door closed behind her, the world she had tried to leave for years finally faded away, and the world she thought she would never return to waited for her on the other side. The pressurized tunnel felt unreal the moment she stepped inside, as if she were walking into a world that existed somewhere between sky and memory. The walls glowed softly, guiding her forward. The hum of the commercial jet faded behind her, replaced by a deeper, stronger sound, the unmistakable heartbeat of Air Force One. With every step, her breath steadied. Her hands relaxed. The weight of her insignia in her pocket reminded her who she was, and who she once promised she would never become again. But the sky does not forget, and tonight, neither could she. Halfway through the tunnel, the floor shifted slightly as both aircraft adjusted their speed. The precision was breathtaking. Two flying giants moving in perfect harmony, just so one forgotten call sign could cross from one to the other. Her pace slowed, not from fear, but from something heavier. Why now? Why her? Why did the Commander-in-Chief want Falcon 7? The questions echoed inside her mind, but she kept walking. At the end of the tunnel, a door waited, simple, white, almost too ordinary for a plane known for its power. But the moment she reached it, the door slid open automatically. Bright, warm light spilled out. She stepped through. And the world changed. The interior of Air Force One was silent, spacious and dignified. Every detail felt deliberate, the polished floors, the soft lighting, the quiet hum of advanced systems hidden behind elegant panels. This wasn't just a plane. It was a symbol, a moving command center, a place where decisions shaped the fate of nations, a place she never thought she would stand again. A man in a dark uniform approached instantly, standing straight, hands folded behind his back. Falcon 7, he said with a respectful nod. Welcome aboard. Hearing her call sign spoken aloud inside Air Force One sent a shiver down her spine. She nodded back, but kept her expression calm. Is he expecting me? She asked. Yes, the officer replied. He asked that you be brought to him immediately. As they walked through the corridor, she felt memories rise. Old missions, silent nights, coded messages, the constant pressure of decisions no one could know about. Memories she buried so deep she thought they would never surface again. Corridor opened into a large room, the communications center of Air Force One. Screens lined the walls, showing maps, encrypted channels, satellite feeds. Several officers stood at their stations, focused but stealing curious glances at her. She wasn't surprised. Falcon 7 was a call sign that had disappeared years ago. A legend to some, a mystery to others. To many in that room, she had been just a story until she stepped aboard. The officer guiding her stopped in front of a door. He straightened his posture even more. He is inside, he said quietly. She took a slow breath. Then the door opened. Inside, the room was calm, brighter than she expected, with a long table and a single man standing at the far end looking out a window toward the horizon. He didn't turn immediately. She recognized the back of his shoulders, the quiet way he breathed, the posture of someone used to carrying responsibility heavier than any aircraft. "Falcon 7, he said finally, without turning. Her heart tightened. His voice had not changed. "Sir," she replied softly. He turned toward her. The president didn't smile. "Not yet." His eyes held something deeper: recognition, relief, and something else she hadn't seen in many years. "You haven't aged at all," he said quietly, walking toward her. She shook her head lightly. "You have." He let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I suppose that's fair." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was not awkward. It was full of history, of unspoken questions, of everything they both remembered, but had never discussed again. Finally, he stepped closer. "Do you know why I called you?" he asked gently. "No," she said honestly. "I only know it must be serious." He nodded. "It is." He walked to the table, pressed a button, and a screen lit up with satellite images, flashes of coordinates, encrypted symbols, flight paths. But one image remained still, a large, circular object floating high above the ocean, too high for any civilian aircraft, too controlled for any weather formation. She narrowed her eyes. "That shouldn't be there." "No," he agreed, "but it is." She studied the image, the shape, the altitude, the impossible stillness. "It's man-made," she whispered. "Yes," he replied. Her heart sank slowly. "And classified highly." She stepped closer, her mind piecing together details faster than she wanted. "Why me?" she asked finally. "There must be hundreds of people who know more about this." The president looked at her, his expression serious. "No," he said quietly. "There's only one." He held her gaze. "Falcon 7. You designed the original protocol for this object." Her chest froze. Her breath stalled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. He continued softly. "You vanished before anyone could bring you back. But when the object activated again today, your name, your call sign, was the only one that unlocked it." Everything inside her went silent. The sky hadn't called her back. Her past had, and whatever was coming. She was the only one who could stop it. The room felt smaller now, not because of its size, but because of the weight of the truth settling inside it. She stared at the image on the screen, a silent object hovering far above the ocean, unmoving, unblinking, waiting. The president watched her quietly, as if he knew the storm inside her mind. "You're saying," she said slowly, "that this thing woke up today?" He nodded. "Yes. And the only way to understand it," she stared at him, "is through the protocol I wrote years ago?" Another nod. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She had written that protocol long before she left her old life. It wasn't meant for public use. It wasn't meant for war. It wasn't even meant for research. It was a last resort key, something she created during a program, so classified that not even the people in this room would have clearance for it. She had created it, and then she had run from it. "Why didn't you destroy it?" she whispered, half to herself. The president exhaled softly. "Because we both knew the world wasn't finished needing you." His words were gentle, but they hit like the sky itself pressing down on her. She looked back at the screen. The object glowed faintly around the edges. A pulse she recognized instantly. A sequence. A call. A door waiting to be opened. And only one person alive knew how to open it. "Falcon 7. The president said quietly, "The world needs you again." She turned away from the screen and walked toward the window, where the sky stretched endlessly beyond Air Force One's wings. The fighter jets outside remained in formation, steady, loyal, silent guardians in the fading light. She remembered the life she had built after leaving the program. Small, quiet, ordinary. She walked in crowds without being seen. She traveled alone. She ate meals without anyone knowing her name. She breathed without the weight of classified missions crushing her chest. She had finally learned how to live. Like a normal human. And now the sky wanted her back. She felt the insignia in her pocket still warm from her hand, still full of the life she tried to run from. She closed her fingers around it. The president stepped beside her. For a long moment, they looked out at the sky together like two former ghosts of a forgotten mission. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "You don't owe the government anything. You don't even owe the world anything." She looked at him, surprised. "You walked away once," he continued. "And you earned that freedom, so why ask me now?" She said, "Because you're the only one who can do this," he said softly. "Not because we want you to. Because the world has no one else." Silence filled the room, not heavy, not frightening, just real. She took a slow breath, letting the truth settle, letting the past rise. "Tell me what you need," she said. The president didn't smile, but relief flickered across his face like a small light finally allowed to shine. He walked to the table, pressed a key, and a new screen opened, this one showing a dark room filled with servers humming quietly. He pointed at a single blinking console. "This is the interface that responds only to your protocol," he explained. "If you reconnect with it, the object will recognize you. It will open its internal data. We'll know what activated it and why. And what if I don't reconnect?" she asked. He looked at her directly. "Then we remain blind. And the object remains active." The meaning was clear. If she refused, the world could face something unknown, unpredictable, possibly uncontrollable. But if she accepted, she wasn't returning to a job. She was returning to a responsibility, a role she built with her own hands. She stepped closer to the display. "How long do I have?" "Minutes," he said. "It's stabilizing for now. But once it begins its next sequence, we'll lose the chance to decode it." She exhaled slowly. Minutes. The sky never gave her more. She finally turned to him, eyes steady, voice calm. "Prepare the link." The president nodded and signaled to the officers. The room came alive with movement systems activating, screens shifting, encrypted channels unlocking. A soft blue glow filled the space, matching the pulse of the object in the sky. She approached the main console. The moment her hand touched the surface, it recognized her old biometric coding she had written herself. The lights shifted. The pulse tightened into a pattern. Her pattern, Protocol Falcon 7. "Engaged," the system announced softly. The room froze. The president watched her, not as a leader watching an asset, but as an old friend witnessing someone step into who they were meant to be. Lines of data streamed across the display, unlocking layers of information buried for years. And then a message appeared, not from the object, from her own writing, something she had coded years ago and forgotten. A warning she had left for her future self. If this activates, the world is nitrogen monoxide longer. SAFE. Her heart dropped. The president whispered, "What does it mean?" She stared at the words, at her own handwriting reflected back through the code, and spoke with a calmness she didn't feel. "It means, this isn't the end." She turned away from the console slowly, her eyes on the glowing horizon outside. "It's the beginning." Air Force One flew forward with purpose. The escort jets tightened formation, and Falcon 7, the woman who vanished from the world, returned to it once more, not as a tourist out, not as a ghost, but as the only person who could protect the sky.